Good morning, and welcome to Redeemer Lutheran Church. I'm Pastor Gary Lodeholt. One of the questions I love to ask people is who their favorite Bible character is and why. If I'm in front of a group, there's always a lot of interesting discussion as we recall the Bible story of that character and what it means to us. Over the years, I've heard people answer with many different characters, but now that I reflect on it, I don't recall anyone ever saying that Peter was their favorite. That's interesting, and it's also a little perplexing because if there is anyone in the Bible who is like us, Peter is it. Many of you have heard me say often that if you want to find yourself in the Bible, just look at what Peter did and substitute your name for his. What Peter does and says tends to reflect just the thing we would have done or said. Last week and this week we are looking at Bible people who messed up and how we are like them. And frankly, I'm not sure if we should say we are like Peter or that Peter is like us. And even more frankly, Peter messed up a lot. He was all the time jumping to conclusions and acting impetuously. He could be profoundly faithful one minute and asked to walk on the water with Jesus, and the next minute find his faith weak and faltering and sinking beneath the waves. And I think that sounds like us too. Faithful and weak in faith and wavering between those two time and again. Another example might be when Jesus asked who the disciples say that he is, and Peter answered that Jesus was the Christ, the Son of the living God. It was a profound moment of insight and faith. But just moments later, when Jesus began to spell out what that meant and how he would suffer and die, Peter told him not to speak like that. And Jesus ended up calling him Satan. We go through wild swings of being on God's side and not being on God's side too. But when Peter really messed up was in the courtyard of the high priest's house after Jesus had been arrested, and Peter denied knowing Jesus. Jesus had told him that he would do it. Before the cock crows, you will deny me 3 times. Even forewarned, he did it anyway. It wasn't the first time even that night. Earlier in the Garden of Gethsemane, Peter and the others had fallen asleep when Jesus asked them to keep watch with him. Twice in the one night, Peter had let Jesus down. And when that cock crows, the Bible is clear that Peter realized what he had done and went out and wept bitterly. Perhaps the person he had let down the most was himself. When Jesus then appears after the resurrection, Peter is amazed with all the rest, but there's also a small sense that he's hanging back a bit. His denial of Jesus seems to be a dark cloud hanging over him. It's almost as if he hopes Jesus doesn't know about what he did. But then, at breakfast on the beach, Jesus asks Peter 3 times if he loves him. And when it happens the 3rd time, it says Peter is sad because he realizes that Jesus knows about the 3-fold denial. Lord, you know everything. You know I love you, he said. Indeed, like Peter, we deny Jesus over and over. Anytime we choose ourselves and our way over God and God's way, anytime we forsake the good of our neighbor, anytime we join in derisive comments or bad thoughts, and so on, we deny Jesus. And we can't hide anything from God either. And yet what Jesus did with Peter on that beach was to give him a new beginning. And from there, Peter was on fire with the gospel. He made mistakes after this too, but he had received grace and tried to live it. Maybe we can too. Thanks for watching, and remember to let this day belong to God.